I know I've been doing these during the day a lot, but I need to be here. I need to be out of my office after supper time. I'm working really, really hard at getting my sleep schedule, my insomnia under control without meds. So it's a long process. We're talking months and months and months and years. I've been working on this, but I'm close. Welcome to these happy golden years, chapter 7, a knife in the dark. The third week went by. Hey, Barefoot. The third week went by, and the fourth. Now there were only 4 weeks more. Though every morning Laura was, though every morning Laura was anxious about the school day ahead, still it was not as bad as the Brewster's house. And every afternoon at 4 o'clock, she drew a breath of relief. One more day had gone well. There were no blizzards yet, but February was very cold. The wind was like knives. Every Friday and Sunday, Almanzo Wilder made the long, cold drive to take her home. Laura did not know how she could get through the week without looking forward to Saturday at home. But she felt sorry for Almanzo, who was making those cold drives for nothing. Much as she wanted to go home every week, she did not want to be under such an obligation to anyone. She was going with him only to get home, but she did not know that. Perhaps he was expecting her to go driving with him after she went home to stay. She did not want to feel obliged to him. Neither could she be unfair or deceitful. She felt she must explain this to him, but she did not know how. At home, Ma worried because she was thinner. "Are you sure you're getting enough to eat at Brewster's?" Ma asked, and Laura answered, "Oh, yes, a great plenty, but it doesn't taste like home cooking." Pa said, "You know, Laura, you don't have to finish the term. If anything worries you too much, you can always come home." "Why, Pa," Laura said, "I couldn't quit. I wouldn't get another certificate. Besides, it's only 3 weeks more." "I'm afraid you're studying too hard," Ma said. "You don't look quite like you get enough sleep." This is how you notice how she skirts around the issues? Watch this. "I go to bed every night at 8 o'clock," Laura assured her. "Well, as you say, it's only 3 weeks more," said Ma. No one knew how she dreaded to go back to Mrs. Brewster's. You notice she doesn't say the Brewsters. It's Mrs. Brewster's because it's obviously her house. It would do no good to tell them. Being at home every Saturday raised her spirits and gave her courage enough for another week. Still, it was not fair to take so much from Almanzo Wilder. He was driving her out to Brewster's that Sunday afternoon. They hardly ever spoke during those long drives. It was still too cold to talk. It was too cold to talk. The jingling sleigh bells sounded frosty in the sparkling cold, and the light cutter sped so fast that the north wind following it was not very sharp on their backs. But he must face that wind all the way back to town. The Brewster shanty was not far ahead when Laura said to herself, "Stop shilly-shallying." Then she spoke out. She said, "I'm only going with you because I want to get home. When I'm at home to stay, I will not go with you anymore. So now you know, and if you want to save yourself these long, cold drives, you can." The words sounded horrid to her as she said them. They were abrupt, rude, and hateful. At the same time, a dreadful realization swept over her. Sorry, folks, I got to turn on another light here. Of what it would mean if Almanzo did not come for her again. She would have to spend Saturdays and Sundays with Mrs. Brewster. After a startled moment, Almanzo said slowly, "I see." There was no time to say more. They were at Mrs. Brewster's door, and the horses must not stand and get chilled. Laura got out saying, "Thank you." He touched his hand to his fur cap, and the cutter went swiftly away. It's only 3 weeks more, Laura said to herself, but she could not keep her spirits from sinking. All that week, the weather grew colder. On Thursday morning, Laura found that the quilt had frozen stiff around her nose while she slept. Her fingers were so numb she could hardly dress. In the other room, the stove lids were red hot, but the heat seemed unable to penetrate the cold around it. Laura was holding her numb hands above the stove when Mr. Brewster burst in, tore off his boots, and began violently rubbing his feet. Mrs. Brewster went quickly to him. "Oh, Louis, what's the matter?" she said anxiously, that Laura was surprised. "My feet," Mr. Brewster said. "I ran all the way from the schoolhouse, but there's no feeling in them." "Let me help," his wife said. She took his feet onto her lap and helped him rub them. She was so concerned and so kind that she seemed like another woman. "Oh, Louis, this dreadful country," she said. "Oh, am I hurting you?" "Go on," Brewster grunted. "It shows the blood's coming back into them." When they had saved his half-frozen feet, Mr. Brewster told Laura they could not go to school that day. "You would freeze," he said. She protested, "But the children will come and I must be there." "I don't think they'll come. I built a fire, and if they do come, they can get warm and go home again. There will be no school today," he said flatly. You notice he didn't offer to leave a note on the chalkboard because if you remember, Mr. Brewster can't read. That settled it, for a teacher must obey the head of the school board. It was a long, wretched day. Mrs. Brewster sat huddled in a quilt close to the stove and sullenly brooding. Mr. Brewster's feet were painful, and Johnny fretted with a feverish cold. Laura did the dishes, made her bed in the freezing cold, and studied her school books. When she tried to talk, there was something menacing in Mrs. Brewster's silence. At last it was bedtime. Laura hoped desperately that tomorrow she could go to school. Meantime, she could escape by going to sleep. See how the curtain, see how the sofa is under the window, and they've just put a string across so they could pull it across the sofa. The cold in the bedroom took her breath away and stiffened her hands so she could hardly undress. For a long time she lay too cold to sleep, but slowly she began to be warmer. A scream woke her. Mrs. Brewster screamed, "You kicked me!" "I did not," said Mr. Brewster. "But I will if you don't go put up that butcher knife." Laura sat straight up. Moonlight was streaming over her bed from the window. Mrs. Brewster screamed again, a wild sound without words that made Laura's scalp crinkle. "Take that knife back to the kitchen," Mr. Brewster said. Laura peeped through the crack between the curtains. The moonlight shone through the calico and thinned the darkness so that Laura saw Mrs. Brewster standing there. Her long white flannel nightgown trailed on the floor, and her black hair fell loose over her shoulders. In her upraised hand, she held the butcher knife. Laura had never been so terribly frightened. "If I can't go home one way, I can another," said Mrs. Brewster. "Go put that knife back," said Mr. Brewster. He lay still, but tensed to spring. "Will you go or won't you?" she demanded. "You'll catch your death of cold," he said. "I won't go over that again, this time of night. I've got you and Johnny to support and nothing in the world but this claim. Go put up that knife and come to bed before you freeze." The knife stopped shaking as Mrs. Brewster's fist clenched on the handle. "Go put it back in the kitchen," Mr. Brewster ordered. After a moment, Mrs. Brewster turned and went to the kitchen. Not until she came back and got into bed did Laura let the curtains fall together again. Slowly, she drew the bed covers over her and lay staring at the curtain. She was terribly frightened. She dared not sleep. Suppose she woke to see Mrs. Brewster standing over her with that knife. Mrs. Brewster did not like her. What could she do? The nearest house was a mile away. She would freeze if she tried to reach it in this cold. Wide awake, she stared at the curtain and listened. There was no sound but the wind. The moon went down, and she stared at the dark until the gray winter daylight came. When she heard Mr. Brewster build the fire and Mrs. Brewster beginning to cook breakfast, she got up and dressed. Nothing was different. Breakfast was the usual silent meal. Laura went to school as soon as she could get away. She felt safe there for the day. It was Friday. The wind was blowing fiercely. Fortunately, it was not a blizzard wind, but it scoured hard particles of snow from the frozen drifts and drove them through every crack in the shanty's north and west walls. From all sides, the cold came in. The big coal heater seemed to make no impression on that. Laura called the school to order. Though she was near the stove, her feet were numb and her fingers could not grip a pencil. She knew that it was colder in the seats. Better put your coats on again, she said, and all of you come to the fire. You may take turns sitting in the front seat or standing by the stove to get warm. Study as best you can. All day the snow was blown low across the prairie and through the schoolroom's walls. Ice froze thick on the water pail, and at noon they set their dinner pails on the stove to thaw the frozen food before they ate it. The wind was steadily growing colder. It cheered Laura to see how well every pupil behaved. No one took advantage of the disorder to be idle or unruly. No one whispered. They all stood by the stove studying and quietly turning about to warm their backs, and all their recitations were good. Charles and Clarence took turns going out into the wind to get coal from the bin and keep the fire going. Laura dreaded the day's end. She was afraid to go back to the house. She was sleepy. She knew that she must sleep, and she feared to sleep in Mrs. Brewster's house. All day tomorrow and Sunday, she must be in that house with Mrs. Brewster, and much of the time Mr. Brewster would be at the stable. She knew she must not be afraid. Pa had always said that she must never be afraid. Very likely nothing would happen. She was not exactly afraid of Mrs. Brewster, for she knew that she was quick and strong as a French little horse. That is, when she was awake, but she had never wanted so much to go home. It had been right to tell Almanza Wilder the truth, but she wished she had not done it so soon. Still, he would not have come so far in the bitter cold anyway. Every moment the wind blew stronger and colder. At 3:30, they were all so cold that she thought of dismissing school early. The mile that Martha and Charles must walk worried her. On the other hand, she should not cut short the pupils' opportunity for learning, and this was not a blizzard. Suddenly, she heard sleigh bells. They were coming. In a moment, they were at the door. Prince and Lady passed the window, and Charles exclaimed, "That Wilder's a bigger fool than I thought he was to come out in this weather." "You may all put your books away," Laura said. It was much too cold for the horses to stand outdoors. "It is growing colder, and the sooner everyone reaches home, the better. School is dismissed." Well, it says there's 5 people here. Do you want me to read the next chapter? I will take the first 2 yeses. And I'm going behind a fan, and I'm going to turn the heat on in here because it's bloody cold. I'll be so glad when this is my bedroom. It will be so much easier. It will be so much easier to maintain the temperature. Hey, Game Queen. Okay, give me a second here, folks, okay? After this, I have to load the dishwasher. And then I have to set up my live stream for the quilt frame. So, alrighty. Give me a second. Alrighty, here we go. Chapter 8, A Cold Ride. Careful of the lantern was all Almanzo said as he helped her into the cutter. Several horse blankets were spread over the seat, and on their ends, under the buffalo robes, a lantern stood burning to warm the nest for Laura's feet. When she ran into the house, Mr. Brewster said, "You aren't thinking of such a thing as driving in this cold." "Yes," she answered, but she lost no time. In the bedroom, she buttoned on her other flannel petticoat and pulled over her shoes her other pair of woolen stockings. She doubled her thick black woolen veil, wrapped it twice around her face and hood, and wound its long ends around her throat. Over that, she put her muffler, crossed its ends on her chest, and buttoned her coat over all. She ran out to the cutter. Here you have an idea of what the sofa looked like, too. Mr. Brewster was there protesting. "You folks are fools to try it," he said. "It's not safe. I want him to put up here for the night," he said to Laura. "Think you better not risk it?" Almanzo asked her. "Are you going back?" she asked him. "Yes, I've got stock to take care of." "Then I'm going," she said. Prince and Lady started swiftly into the wind. It struck through all the woolen folds and took Laura's breath away. She bent her head into it, but she felt it flowing like icy water on her cheeks and chest. Her teeth clenched to keep from chattering. The horses were eager to go. Their trotting feet drummed on the hard snow, and every sleigh bell cheerily rang. Laura was thankful for the speed that would soon reach shelter from the cold. She was sorry when they trotted more slowly. They dropped into a walk, and she supposed that Almanzo was slowing them for a rest. Probably horses must not be driven too hard against such a bitter wind. "Hey, Silver and Blackie!" She was surprised when he stopped them and got out of the cutter. Dimly through the black veil, she saw him going to their drooping heads and heard him say, "Just a minute, lady," as he laid his mittened hands on Prince's nose, and after a moment he took his hands away with a scraping motion. Prince tossed his head high and shook music from his bells. Quickly, Almanzo did the same to Lady's nose, and she too tossed her head. Almanzo tucked himself into the cutter, and they sped on. Laura's veil was a slab of frost against her mouth that made her speaking uncomfortable, so she said nothing, but she wondered. Almanzo's fur cap came down to almost his eyebrows, and his muffler covered his face to his eyes. His breath froze white on the fur and along the muffler's edge. The best fur for a hood is wolf fur, because it doesn't create a frost. He drove with one hand, keeping the other under the robes, often changing so that neither hand would freeze. The horses trotted more slowly again, and again he got out and went to hold his hands on their noses. When he came back, Laura asked him, "What's the matter?" He answered, "Their breath freezes over their noses till they can't breathe. I have to thaw it off." They said no more. Laura remembered the cattle drifted in the October blizzard that began the hard winter. Their breath had smothered them till they would have died if Pa had not broken the ice from their noses. The cold was piercing through the buffalo robes. Wow. It crept through Laura's wool coat and woolen dress, through all her flannel petticoats and the 2 pairs of woolen stockings drawn over the folded legs of her warm flannel union suit. In spite of the heat from the lantern, her feet and legs grew cold. Her clenched jaws ached, and 2 sharp needles began to ache at her temples. That's a sign of hypothermia starting. Almanzo reached across and pulled the robes higher, tucking them behind her elbows. Cold? He asked. No, Laura answered very clearly. It was all she could say without letting her teeth chatter. It was not true, but he knew what she meant. He knew that she meant that she was not so cold that she could not bear it. There was nothing to do but go on, and she knew he was cold too. No, their breath, okay, because they would, breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. They're drawing in their moisture of their own breath, and when they puff it out, it goes up over their nose, and it creates a film of frost across their nostrils that he'd have to do this to let the breath thaw it and then scrape it off, or they could suffocate. That's why they were slowing down. And finally, when he dropped into a walk, that's when he stopped them, because he knew they were struggling. Again, he stopped the horses and got out in the wind to thaw ice from their noses. Again, the bells rang out merrily. The sound seemed as cruel now as the merciless wind. Though her veil made a darkness, she could see the sun that was shining bright on the white prairie. Almanzo came back into the cutter. All right? He asked. Yes. I've got to stop every couple of miles. They can't make more, Almanzo explained. Laura's heart sank. Then they had come only 6 miles. There were still 6 miles to go. They went on swiftly against the cutting wind. In spite of all she could do, Laura shook all over. Pressing her knees tight together did not stop their shaking. The lantern beside her feet, under the fur robes, seemed to give no warmth. The pains bored into her temples, and a knot of pain tightened in her middle. Hypothermia is when your body starts drawing heat from your extremities, your hands, your feet, to draw the heat in to protect your internal organs. Only the pain in her middle kept tightening, but it was duller. The sound of the wind and the bells and the cutter's runners and on the snow all blended into one monotonous sound, rather pleasant. She knew when Almanzo felt... I'm losing pages here. She knew that when Almanzo left the cutter to thaw the ice from the horses' noses, but everything seemed like a dream. All right, she asked. He asked. She nodded. It was too much to speak. Laura, he said, taking hold of her shoulder and shaking her a little. The shaking hurt. It made her feel the cold again. You sleepy? A little, she answered. Don't go to sleep. You hear me? I won't, she said. She knew what he meant. If you go to sleep in such cold, you freeze to death. The horses stopped again. Almanzo asked, making it all right? Yes, she said. He went to take the ice from the horses' noses, and when he came back, it's not far now, he said. She knew he wanted her to answer, so she said, that's good. Sleeplessness kept coming over her in long, warm waves. Though she was holding her eyes wide open, she shook her head, took burning gulps of air, and struggled awake, but another wave of sleeplessness came, and another. Often, when she was too tired to struggle any longer, Almanzo's voice helped her. She heard him ask, You all right? Yes, she said, and for a moment she would be awake. She heard the sleigh bells clearly and felt the wind blowing. Then another wave came. Here we are, she heard him say. Yes, she answered. Then suddenly she knew that they were at the back door of home. The wind was not so strong there. Its force was broken by the building on the other side of 2nd Street. Almanzo lifted the robes, and she tried to get out of the cutter, but she was too stiff. She could not stand up. The door flashed open, and Ma took hold of her, exclaiming, My goodness, are you frozen? I'm afraid she's pretty cold, Almanzo said. Get those horses into shelter before they freeze, said Pa. We'll take care of her. The sleigh bells dashed away while Pa and Ma, holding her arms, Laura stumbled into the kitchen. Take her shoes off, Carrie, And as she peeled off Laura's veil and knitted woolen hood, the frost of her breath had frozen the veil to the hood, and they came away together. Your face is red, Ma said in relief. I'm thankful it's not white and frozen. I'm only numb, Laura said. Her feet were not frozen either, though she could hardly feel Pa's hands rubbing them. Now, in the warm room, she began to shake from head to foot, and her teeth chattered. She sat close by the stove while she drank the hot ginger tea that Ma made for her, but she could not get warm. She had been cold so long, ever since she got out of bed that morning in the Brewsters' cold kitchen. Her place at the table was farthest from the stove and nearest the window. Then came the long walk through the snow to school, with the wind blowing against her and whirling up and down her skirts, the long cold day in the schoolhouse and the long ride back home. But there was nothing to complain of, for she was now home. You took a long chance, Laura, Pa said soberly. I did not know that Wilder was starting out until he had gone, and I was sure he'd stay at Brewster's. It was 40 below zero when the crazy fellow started, and the thermometer stood frozen afterwards. It's been steadily growing colder ever since. There's no telling how cold it is now. All's well that ends well, Pa, Laura answered him with a shaky laugh. It seemed to her that she never would get warm, but it was wonderful to eat supper in the happy kitchen and then to sleep safely in her own bed. She woke to find the weather moderating. At breakfast, Pa said the temperature was near 20 below zero. The cold snap was over. In church that Sunday morning, Laura thought how foolish she had been to let herself be so miserable and frightened. There was only 2 weeks more, and then she could come home to stay. While Almanzo was driving her out to the Brewsters that afternoon, she thanked him for taking her home that week. No need for thanks. You knew I would. I know I didn't, she answered him honestly. What do you take me for? He said. Do you think I'm the kind of fellow that'd leave you out here at Brewster's when you're so homesick just because there's nothing in it for me? Why, Laura stopped. The truth was she had never thought much about what kind of person he was. He was so much older. He was a homesteader. Now in the records they say he's 10 years older than her, but he's actually only 8 years older than her. To tell you the whole truth, he said, I was in two minds about risking that trip. I figured all week I'd drive out for you, but when I looked at the thermometer, I came pretty near deciding against it. Well, why didn't you? Laura asked. Well, I was starting out in the cutter, and I pulled up in front of Fuller's to look at the thermometer. The mercury was all the way down in the bulb, below 40, and the wind blowing colder every minute. Just then, Cap Garland came by. He saw me there, ready to go out to Brewster's for you, and looking at the thermometer. So he looked at it. You know how he grins? Well, he was going into Fuller's. He just said to me over his shoulder, God hates a coward. So you came because you wouldn't take a dare? Laura asked. No, it wasn't a dare, Almanzo said. I just figured he was right. Thank you for joining me for Chapter 7 and 8. My books are falling apart. I'm going to have to get a new set. For Chapter 7 and 8 of these Happy Golden Years. I don't know when I'm going to read again, but I will pop in and read whenever I get a few moments. All right? Take care. God bless, and we'll see you again soon. See you next time. Mwah! Poke. Poke.